If Jesus had a wife or had a girlfriend, it does not make me respect his teachings any the less than before.
I believe that a fractal of the God consciousness, the divine energy itself, is in every atom in my body. So
Yes.
thereby, I am a fractal of God walking in the flesh. I never said that Jesus was married as a hard statement, but I did say that it could have been that maybe he got married, maybe he had kids, maybe the Merovingian bloodline is still on this planet until this very day.
This is a church doctrine. But when you get to the root meanings of the key words in the New Testament, it is insupportable. The Gospels and New Testament talk about something else, but the church has distorted it into a doctrine of hell with which people have been terrified and manipulated for century after century.
Some people seem to get extremely agitated when they hear me talk about the fact that I believe that we are gods, that God is in us and we're inside of God. In other words, I believe that we're a fractal of God, not that we're a God that we can create a universe, but I believe in the fractal mathematics of the universe, and which is a mathematical formula that has been discovered and well documented called the Mandelbrot set. And that Mandelbrot set shows that we're living in this created reality. So yes, the Bible is right, the Quran is right, all these indigenous cultures around the world, I believe they're accurate. We're living in a creation. It just describes the mathematics behind the creation. And so if everything is a fractal throughout the entire known universe, I believe that a fractal of the God consciousness, the divine energy itself, is in every atom in my body. So thereby, I am a fractal of God walking in the flesh, so that God can know what is it like to experience life through the eyes of Billy Carson. What is it like to experience life through the eyes of Paul Anthony Wallace? You know?
I'm absolutely with you. It's a very Platonic way of seeing things, and I see it that way too. There's a moment in the gospel where people were accusing Jesus of equating himself with God, and he says, but doesn't the scripture say ye are all gods? And then there's a wonderful definition of God, the New Testament God, given by the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts, chapter 17. He's talking to a non-religious audience. So they're not Jewish believers, they're not Christian believers. So he needs to clarify what he means by God. He's using the Greek word theos. And he gives a nice description of the Greek understanding of theos, their word for God, the word that Jesus used. And he said, by theos, I mean the source of the cosmos and everything in it, that in which we all live and move and have our being, of which we are all offspring.
Yes.
And I love that because I think that's a definition of God that people way beyond the world of faith could accept, could do business with. It's saying my intelligence is a participation in one of the properties of the cosmos, intelligence. My consciousness is a participation in the consciousness that's endemic to the cosmos. And it comes back to what you were saying, the cosmos experiencing itself through what I see, through what I hear, through what I feel, through what I experience. And I find that a very empowering description of God because there's no separation in it. You and I couldn't be closer to the source by Paul's definition there. There's nothing we have to do to scramble back into the presence of God because we are all emanations of God. Exactly. I find it empowering. Religion trades on separation anxiety. Religion trades on the idea that you and I are separated from God and you need to do A, B, and C to get into his good books because you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. And we, the priests, or we, the teachers, will tell you how to do that. It is a recipe for all kinds of psychological abuse and manipulations, which I've seen plenty of in the world of church ministry in my time as a minister and as a church attender. I see plenty of it. And at the beginning of the gospel, there are some wonderful sayings from Jesus, which you can find not only in the canonical gospels, but in the extra canonical gospels as well. So in the Gospel of Matthew, we're told the message Jesus toured with the beginning of his public ministry. And by the conventional translation, it sounds like typical revivalist preacher, grave warning, trying to threaten you into being a good believer. The conventional translation is repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And it sounds like he's saying you better clean your life up because God's about to show up. You don't want to get on the wrong side of him and offend him. And we hear that through the lens of later doctrines of heaven and hell and all that sort of thing. Sounds like a grave warning. You go to the Greek, go to the root meanings of those words. And metanoiete means go beyond the mind. That means go beyond what you think with more than this, go beyond the mind, re-understand, transcend your current understanding, repent for the basileon uranon. Basileon can be a kingdom, but if I say kingdom, you think, oh, that's a place where I serve the king. I have to do everything the king says. And we get into that religious paradigm of obedience versus sin and punishment, obedience and reward, all that sort of thing. You don't have to translate it kingdom. You could equally translate it with the word realm. Now, a realm has a very different connotation to it. A realm is something amazing to be explored. And uranon, well, that's the word for sky. That's the word for space. It could be used as a word for the cosmos. And the word has come close, can be reached out and taken hold of. You put that together and he's saying, go beyond the mind, transcend your mind, because the realm of the cosmos is available to you, is impossibly close. And then later when he says the realm of the cosmos is within you, there couldn't be a more profound invitation to explore inner space, outer space, to explore the principles of the cosmos. And that can mean explorations in the way of spirituality, in the way of science, in the way of cosmology. It is a huge exploration we've been invited on by Jesus, but that is not how it has been taught, translated, and preached for 2,000 years. And that habitual thinking, that religious entrainment is so strong that people find it very difficult to get beyond their English translations, back to the Greek, back to the Aramaic, back to the Hebrew, and begin asking, what was this really about in the beginning?
Yeah. That's so incredible, because I went back to the Aramaic. I had a podcast where I talked about this about a year and a half ago or so. And I told them, break this down. Let's go back to the root words. Let's go back to the Hebrew. And I had my Hebrew book and I had my Aramaic book on my desk at my previous location. And I was showing people that these words are not exactly what we think they are. When you go back to the root and the original translations of these words, the original language of these words, you find out that it means something totally different, something more empowering, something even more incredible, something so much deeper than this surface thing that just tries to make you seem like if you don't do this, this is going to happen, or you're going to be in trouble, or something like that.
And I want to just tell people, if they think, well, how on earth do I do that? There are resources that I am so thankful that they're in my possession and have been for decades, that it opened this world up to people. So the first thing you need to do is get hold of an interlinear Bible. So a New Testament where it's showing you the Greek words, and it'll usually have a couple of translations either side, so you can see how different Bible translators have dealt with what's in the text. And then you can do that with the Hebrew as well. And then you need a really authoritative lexicon. So for the New Testament, you'd go to the Bauer, Arndt, Gingrich, and Danker lexicon. For Hebrew, you'd go into Brown, Driver, Briggs. And what's wonderful about those books is that they show you how those words are used in all different places. So you can get the full scope of the word, and then it'll break it down so you can see the most primitive aspects of that word. And sometimes if you go back to the text and use the more primitive reading, that's the best way of unpeeling 2,000 years of habitual thinking. That's how you get beyond the religious entrainment to see what did this mean in the beginning. Sometimes and this is especially true of some key words in the Old Testament, if you leave the words untranslated and just watch how they behave in the stories, all of a sudden you'll see things about the stories that you didn't notice before, particularly if you want to morally evaluate what's happening in texts, or to evaluate it for whether you're looking at something spiritual or something sort of flesh and bone or something technological. Sometimes just leave the word untranslated for a while and see what happens. There are online resources for people. You can go to Bible Hub and you'll find interlinear resources there, and there's a built-in lexicon you can use there, which is very, very helpful. It gets you quite a long way. But if you can get hold of those books, that really breaks you out of the narrow fundamentalist, you can only read it this way kind of world that a lot of church people unfortunately find themselves trapped in.
Right, absolutely. And when you begin to see the broader, bigger picture, for me at least, it's so empowering. And it really brings me back to one of the verses in the Bible where it said, you should do greater things than I, right? So we're supposed to do greater things, I believe that's referencing Jesus, than Jesus himself.
Well, yeah, that's right. What you're saying was right, Petty, because, and it's interesting, I have, through all my years of faith, always seen Jesus as a model, that he's showing us what is possible.
Yes.
And in the book of Hebrews, in the New Testament, the writer there is at pains to say that Jesus was human in exactly the same way as you and me. And he really spells that out. And then Jesus says, as you rightly say, what you've seen me do, these and even greater things shall you do. And even when I get back to the prologue to the gospel, in the Gospel of John, the story arc of Jesus's life of pre-existing this material life, incarnating and having these experiences and struggles and this journey, and then outlasting this life to a new experience, what the Gnostics call going to the great repose, or what Jesus talked about returning to source, returning to the Father. I think that's given as a template for all our lives. And that was sort of the general worldview at that time. That was how Plato understood who we really are at a deeper level. And many of the first Christians went to these texts from Plato. That was their worldview, and they recognized it when they read the Gospel of John. And so they were far more inclined, I believe, to see Jesus as this model of what is possible for us, as this picture of human development and ascension. And it's only later religion that has put Jesus up here and us all the way down here, and all we can do is pay, pray, and obey. That is, I think, a real distortion of the empowering message that I think all the gospel writers, including the canonical writers, intended for their readers. Yeah,
absolutely. And like you say, I see Jesus as an archetype for us to model ourselves after, you know? That's interesting, because I've been in podcasts before where I mentioned, well, they bring it up. People ask me, you know, what about Jesus? And what do you think about Jesus? And after I give them my opinion of Jesus as an incredible archetype for mankind to follow, and in a couple of podcasts I mentioned that, you know, they discovered the gospel of Jesus, his wife, and a young professor at the University of Harvard, you know, brought it to their attention and it's in the Harvard Seminary. I never said that Jesus was married as a hard statement, but I did say that it could have been that maybe he got married, maybe he had kids, maybe the Merovingian bloodline is still on this planet till this very day. People kind of took that out of context and warped it a little bit. But as I dug into the story about this text of this gospel of Jesus' wife, it was just pretty interesting to see that there was a lot of pushback on that, and it was for years.
Yes,
a lot of years.
I don't fully understand why there is so much pushback on that question. Bart Ehrman, who's a biblical scholar, said just the other day, what does it matter? If Jesus, but it does seem to matter to people. And I think that's really illustrated by the pushback that it was Karen King, wasn't it?
Karen King, correct.
Who did the study on the Gospel of Jesus' wife and published on it. So she's a Harvard Divinity School professor, so she knows her stuff. And it didn't go much for that document, which appears to have been a Coptic translation of a Greek text from the 200s, although the papyrus, I think, dates from a little later, doesn't go much further than you can find in the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I think Pistis Sophia is the other one, where it's very clear that in those documents, bearing in mind, my question is not what really happened. My question is, what did the early Christians believe? There were clearly early Christians who believed that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had a very close relationship. The Gospel of Philip said he used to kiss her frequently on the mouth. All those documents said there was a bit of conflict between Mary Magdalene and Peter, because Peter reckoned he was the senior disciple, and yet Mary Magdalene was getting teachings from Jesus that they weren't getting. And she was a teaching figure as well. So they all sort of corroborate each other on those points, or maybe they borrow from each other. But then the Gospel of Jesus' wife goes that one step forward and uses the word wife. Jesus refers to a woman as his wife, and she will be able to be my disciple. What is the problem with that? Now, clearly there is a problem. It clearly upsets people, because the Vatican almost immediately says, oh, this is clearly false. And then you've got a professor from the University of Durham, Francis Watson, I think it was, who said, oh, that can't be right. And he hadn't even handled the document, if I understand correctly. I'm sorry, Francis Watson, if I'm doing you an injustice, but I don't think he had handled the document before saying, oh, that's clearly rubbish. But then, thankfully, Roger Bagnall, professor of history at Yale, comes forward and endorses what Karen King is saying. And then the Harvard Review does serious study on the fragment itself. And they said there's absolutely no evidence that this is a forgery or fake.
Correct.
But because of the pushback, and here we are in the 21st century, where you'll often hear people say, oh, that's been debunked. And all that means is they've heard someone with a different opinion speak strongly about it.
Facts.
It's not been debunked. It has not been falsified. Very senior, credible authorities, people who have had possession of the fragment, have studied it, have said there's no evidence of fakery or forgery. So the Vatican really can't have an opinion, because it hadn't done that work, and it responded so quickly with that opinion. Karen King had taken her time over it. Harvard backed her up. Professor from Yale backed her up. But still the story circulates, oh, that's been debunked.
Yeah.
It
got a lot of pushback.
But why is it important? And it mystifies me a little bit, but, the church forcing people to recant has a pretty ugly history throughout church history.
Thank you. Tell me, preach, brother.
Whether we're talking about Galileo or Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, why is it necessary to force people to recant? I remember there was he was a huge figure in the world of evangelical Christianity, John Stott. He was a senior pastor at a major Anglican church in the UK, but he had a global ministry as a teacher and a writer. And he wrote, actually it's in a book behind me here, this book here, Essentials. He wrote, as an evangelical, so almost a fundamentalist, he wrote about the doctrine of hell. And he said, this is a church doctrine. But when you get to the root meanings of the key words in the New Testament, it is insupportable. The Gospels and New Testament talk about something else. But the church has distorted it into a doctrine of hell with which people have been terrified and manipulated for century after century. And he said, I stand in the Reformed tradition that says that we should change our beliefs if they're contradicted by the sources we claim. And we should go back to the Bible, he said, back to the Gospels, back to the New Testament, and just test that doctrine because I believe it's incorrect. Never mind that John Stott had been on an absolute pedestal. He was like the Pope of the evangelical world internationally. But when he said that, the pushback was appalling.
Yeah.
And he was forced to recant in the end. Now, in my book, The Eden Conspiracy, I make the case that John Stott was right, that the church doctrine of hell is a distortion. And there are people teaching it who are teaching it on an entirely false footing, still distorting texts to this day.
Yeah.
And so pushback, what does that mean? It's been debunked. What does that mean? What that really is a story of bullying. It's not a story of falsification. The gospel of Jesus' wife has not been falsified, but Karen King has been bullied. That's the story. And I think any seeker of truth, any curious person, any person who's interested in sort of academic objectivity should be horrified by them. And just go to the people who have the fragment, who have done the study, and find out what they're saying. Now, this is not something to go to the stake over. I agree with Bart Ehrman. What does it matter if Jesus had a girlfriend?
It doesn't matter.
What does it matter if Jesus had a wife? What is that threatening? But I think early on what it was threatening is that there's always been a consistent agenda to push women out of the picture. A woman in a lot of religious traditions can be a virgin or a mother of somebody great, but they can't be a teacher. They can't be an authority. And even to this day, I think women have a hard go in the church, Karen King included. And I think the church still needs to clean up its act on that front, all the while trying to take credit for emancipation, being progressive, so on and so forth. But it has not been. It's been a terrible force for conservatism, and all kinds of misogyny has been done in the name of religion throughout the ages. I think we need to move beyond that. Personally, I think it makes Jesus more interesting.
Yeah.
If he had a girlfriend or if he had a wife.
Why not? The angels were having sex with human beings.
that doesn't damage. Well, that's right. If you're talking about Genesis 6, that's right. Beings thought of as angels. I wouldn't use that word myself.
Yeah. Right.
Because angel doesn't tell you what kind of being it is. It just says it's somebody on assignment, someone with a message. But if Jesus had a wife or had a girlfriend, it does not make me respect his teachings any the less than before. So I think it's all the kerfuffle around that is very strange.